ECBN is not only a business network, it's also a network of networks, and one part of our network is also being connected to NCAT, and Michael showed what NCAT is, and also that we want to establish more and deeper connections to the research community, and therefore we are really proud that Christina is now Director of Research for ECBN, and made it possible to bring interesting new research projects to the conference. And I will hand the microphone to you, and you will introduce everybody, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Karin. Well, thank you so much for your attention. We come to the last part of the day. And, well, this is something new. You know, ECBN, now Creative Fed, and ECIS is a space for rethinking cultural policies and reshaping cultural and creative sectors. And this year, we wanted to include researchers from different levels, degree, master, PhD candidates, and postdoc in this debate. And because we think that ECBN is in a very good position to provide this space for connection between practitioners, researchers, the academia, and policymakers. So we are going to open this space to deepen the discussion about how CCCIs can contribute to the green transition. And we are going to welcome 4 researchers that will make 3 presentations. We have chosen very different case studies. We have spoken to them today several times about textiles, design, and fashion. So we are going to have our first presentation about that topic. The second one will be about another level, European cultural networks. And the third one about the relationship between technology and heritage. So let's start with the first one. The title of the research project is The Engagement of a Pioneering Circular Fashion Brand in Driving Sustainable Consumption Behavior. The case of mud jeans in the Netherlands. This research project is very interesting because it explores the shift on business models of fashion brands towards more sustainable models, paying special attention to behavioral changes in consumption that we have spoken to them today for several times. And I will invite 2 researchers, Elisabetta and Fie from the Netherlands, to speak about this. Before you come, just very few words about yourselves. Elisabetta is a master's student in cultural economics and entrepreneurship at the Erasmus University in Rotterdam, and she has 8 years of experience in digital technology and marketing and communication. And her research interest, is in sustainable development in the CCCIs. And Fie van der Mark did her bachelor in international arts and culture and is currently candidate of MA in cultural economics and entrepreneurship. And she's interested in researching on how arts can help to change the world for the better. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Right, so first of all, thank you for having us today. It's a pleasure meeting everyone, and it's an honor to kick off this research pitching platform here as the first students. I'm aware it's late in the afternoon and you had a lot of information to digest today already. But if you stick around for a few more minutes for the next 3 presentations, I'm sure you may learn a thing or 2. As Christine already introduced, we are Faye and Lisa, and we would like to share our findings of our research on sustainable consumption behavior, and in the denim industry in particular. And in fashion, Bernd mentioned this morning, every one of us is involved in fashion, whether we want it or not. We don't have a choice, otherwise we will be walking around naked. Unfortunately, the fashion industry is the most polluting industry of the CCIs, with 9,200 million tons of waste produced globally every year. Luckily, as part of the European Green Deal, there are already legislative proposals being put forward earlier this year to make it easier for consumers to make sustainable choices. So, for example, more transparency on the sustainability of a product, as well as the ban on greenwashing. So we will dive a bit more into the denim industry, first of all, as the brand that we are collaborating with is a Dutch denim brand. So the Netherlands in specific is a real denim country. It's on the frontier of technological development in the denim industry, and Amsterdam is really a denim capital. The city is home to the first global school of denim, where the future cotton pioneers are being trained. And a lot of jeans brands, globally known ones like G-Star, are either born or headquartered in the Netherlands. And following up on the European Green Deal, a public initiative, the Denim Deal is signed in 2021 together with PVH in order to together drive a more systematic change and close the denim loop. So one of the companies that are really on the forefront of this all is Mud Jeans. They are one of those smaller companies or startups that are actually trying to change the denim industry. And if you want to go to the next slide, I'll tell you a bit more about them, why we're working together with them. And one thing I forgot about the denim industry, why it is so important. Just to produce one pair of jeans takes up 7,500 liters of water. And that's the equivalent of taking a bath every other weekend for a year long. So that's why this industry in particular within fashion is also important, because the denim industry is like really one of the more polluting, or like cotton, one of the most polluting materials to produce with. So what I was saying, on the forefront of this all is Mud Jeans, a company that produces jeans more sustainably, but also was the first one to introduce the lease a jeans concept. So for a monthly subscription fee, their customers can lease, or let's say rent a jeans, and after this return it, buy it at a discount, or exchange it for a different model. And lastly, Mud Jeans is very much involved in raising awareness globally about this change that needs to happen, with a mission to drastically change the fashion industry. And this they do with only a small team of 15 employees in the Netherlands. And about their production, as I was saying, producing the jeans is so environmentally unfriendly. But their jeans are produced with 92% less water and 74% less CO2 emissions than the traditional jeans. So it was very interesting to work together with them on measuring and managing the impact that they have.
So together with Mud Jeans, we set up a research that aimed at measuring and managing their impact. Well, impact takes place over time. It can be long-term or short-term. Nonetheless, it's rather intangible. So that is why we believe it's really relevant to present today our approach in tackling this. In researching impact, we use the theory of change. And this is a conceptual framework that allows really to get a better grip on impact. And it relies on two main assumptions that are listed over there. And we believe that knowledge is really the key to changing behaviors. So the starting point of our research was to investigate the knowledge of customers of MUD and potential customers. And through a mixed method approach, we actually reached out to 450 plus international people. So we collected data from them. In doing so, we targeted both people that were already familiar with the brand and people that were not. And we also conducted interviews with industry experts. The amount of data that we obtained really gave us a lot of insights. So we're going to share some of it. And we asked basically what the customers and potential customers were thinking and doing regarding sustainability. And we used Likert scales in order to gauge their responses. And we created a variable that's called the green score. And the green score indicates the depth of the consciousness of the individuals that were participating. So our data indicates that the more, the higher the green score is, the more likely that people make sustainable purchases, and the more likely they are to lease a jeans. Moreover, we found that 87% of our responses are already familiar with greenwashing, so they were able to give the right definition. However, only 17% is knowledgeable regarding fabrics. So this could indicate that the majority of people still could use some education to get a more profound perspective on sustainability. We also found that ambassadors and customers of MUD jeans have a higher green score on average and are also more likely to boycott fast fashion than those that are unfamiliar with MUD jeans. So from this we could also deduct that MUD has a positive impact on its customers, which was what we were trying to research. Of course, it's more nuanced than that, but we won't go in super depth here. And next to that, we also found that the study demonstrates that the majority of people never ever leased a jeans before, and there were certain barriers listed over here that hamper it. So with this information, MUD can actually improve their impact if they manage to deconstruct those barriers, by which they can approximate their innovative mission and the desired impact better. And now we'll just dive into one question from our survey, which is the one mentioned in bold. And it's been answered 235 times in our research. And we exemplify with this question that there's very much to learn from the perceptions of the customers or potential customers, especially when trying to understand impact. It's a really relevant question to ask. So we labeled and categorized all the answers in different layers, and because there were certain answers with multiple ideas in them, there were actually more labels than answers. That's why the number is bigger than 235. So looking at this pie chart, the first part of it is roughly 25%, and those people accredit that that change is about personal commitment. So they referred to ideas such as learning to sew for yourself or repairing your own clothes, spending more money on less fashion items, or having literally a smaller size closet. And the second proportion of the pie chart is about collective effort, and it highlights the necessity of socialization of sustainability amongst friends and family, and also highlights the necessity of a diminishing glorification of fast fashion, especially on social media. Now, the third part, with 37 labels, it discussed the need of government action, for example, with regulation or the support of infrastructure of recycling. But most significantly, there were 239 labels found under industry changes. And that's quite a big number we found. So it is indicating that consumers are largely concerned with the transparency and sustainability of production processes, And moreover, that they're enthusiastic about the use of innovative materials, about biodegradable packaging, and for example, about targeted marketing campaigns. So what we can get from this is that the majority of people, when it comes to expressing their vision of a sustainable fashion future, are more concerned with the production side than with the consumption side. So perhaps we could say that overall consumers are more critical about what the brands are doing than perhaps what they're doing themselves. And we believe that posing this kind of open questions really helps for the brands to understand their clients better and also understand the field that they operate in. So therefore, it's quite a relevant thing we consider for multiple brands to ask, not just for fashion brands. So we will share some of the recommendations that were based on our insights. Obviously, there were much more insights that we're not discussing here, but with the recommendations, hopefully we'll get there.
Yeah, so we created a set of recommendations specifically for the company, but for here I would like to highlight 4 of them because we think they're not only relevant for as Faye said, the fashion or jeans industry, but actually for quite some sustainable brands in general. So what we could see is that the sustainable brands could be even more active in distinguishing them from the less sustainable or the greenwashing brands. There's like maybe lack of information on their website or in store that actually is really in your face saying this is a sustainable choice. And obviously there's this greenwashing issue around it, which should be combated as well. When is a brand actually truthful? But there's minor things to also already do on that front. So not just the information sharing, but collaborating with other institutions that stand for sustainability. Or in the case of Mud Jeans, they're like a B Corp. They got the certification that they've proven to be a force for good. So that's something that really strengthens this first point. Second, related a bit to this, but more on this brand communication and marketing side of it, not just that the brand is sustainable, but actually talking about what impact a customer can also make by choosing this product. So by describing on a pair of jeans or on a garment piece how much water it saved, how much less emissions than a traditional similar garment, it speaks to the ego of the customer when they would read this and they have multiple options to choose from, and hopefully it would convince them to choose the right option. But also, as one of the barriers to leasing, for example, was mentioned as hygiene, we can imagine that this also holds for renting garments, which is also a growing trend, as well as vintage shopping. So how to lift this barrier in the case of a fashion like brand offering this option, it would also be describing the whole cleaning process, for example, and explaining and convincing the customer that it is a hygienic garment, because if that information is missing, then this barrier will remain. The third one is about including more target groups. So what we saw in the studies is that some people are missing their options because they're not in the range that the company is offering. Think of plus size or petite. So how to reach more customers and make them choose the right thing is make sure that they have these options. So having a more inclusive range and also targeting these people, but also in general having more targeted marketing campaigns to get the products out or explain what, for example, a company like Mud Jeans is offering. Because high on the list of barriers was also the unfamiliarity, not knowing that there's an option to lease or rent clothes. So the first 3 are really focused more on the brand in specific. But looking also at other parties involved, we think collaborations between brand and policymakers or educators could really be a joint force in strengthening the mission and achieving the goal quicker and better. And an example of this would be the collaboration between Mud Jeans and the Van Gogh Museum in the Netherlands. So that was just very recent. And then I think these are the recommendations I would actually leave most of you for the end of today. But if there's anyone in the audience interested in further research into sustainable consumption behavior, or a brand that's interested in also adopting this kind of impact measurement approach, we just have 2 very quick takeaways still. So the first one would be the use of the theory of change we found really useful in measuring the impact and also visualizing how the actions, how the knowledge actually leads to the actions that we want to see achieved. And then secondly, the green score that we've introduced as a variable in our data was really useful to distinguish the 2 or even multiple groups of consumers that have different kinds of knowledge that they hold on sustainability, and see the differences in their knowledge as well as what comes after that, their behavior. And it could also be insightful for brands actually to have different targeting like tactics or strategies, because the 2 different groups could be targeted with different information or are on different kind of platforms where they search about where to buy and what to buy. Yeah, with those recommendations, I would leave you for today. Thank you.
And so we heard that there is a Q&A afterwards, so we're not going to ask you to pose your questions right now, but thank you a lot for your attention, and it means a lot to us to be standing here, so thank you.
Thank you very much for this enlightening presentation. Okay, let's move to another presentation, completely different, and which title is The Accelerator Effect, the role of European cultural networks in advancing a green transition. We have the pleasure to come with Martina Magno. She is a cultural manager and also a researcher. She did her PhD on the value and evaluation of cultural cooperation projects focused on the Euro-Arab region. And now she's a postdoc at the University of Côte d'Azur in France. And her research aims to unpack the role of European cultural networks in advancing the green transition. And she proposes a set of recommendations and policy measures at European and national level. Martina.
Thank you. There is a problem with the presentation. I don't know if we can have it. Excellent. Okay. So thank you, Christina, for this introduction. Is everything okay? Shall we wait? Okay. Then I just introduce myself. Let's just say a few words. So I'm very happy to be here with you today. This topic is actually new to me, like exploring all the green transition in the cultural and creative industries. And I come here in my capacity, of course, as a researcher, but at the same time as somebody that is working with different cultural organizations and accompanying them in different processes. And this, what I'm going to present to you today, is the result of an action research project, which is also under development, but it will show you the relevance, let's say, of European cultural networks in this green transition. And through the case study of the European Theatre Convention that I have the privilege, let's say, to work with identifying areas of change in their work, I will try to show you why and how the European cultural network should be further supported in this role, exactly because of this accelerator effect that they have in introducing change. So, oops, now I have the opportunity. Yeah. So how all this started? A few months ago, I was invited by the European Theatre Convention through a collaboration that we have with On the Move, which is another network specialized on mobility, cultural mobility, to accompany them in the process of evaluation of their current Creative Europe funding. And we wanted to say, okay, so how are we going to talk about impact? And then the theory of change came into the conversation, but also a technique that is called the most significant change. So how members of a cultural network can actually define change and what is the change that is supported and enhanced in them through their existence and their participation in the network. One of the main fields of work of the European Theatre Convention is about green theatre, is about the green transformation in this industry. So I started doing interviews with members of this network to understand, like how has the network actually supported you in this way. And this is the beginning of something that I proposed back to them to develop into a more research project, because, okay, now we produced a number of stories of change, but it's interesting to see how this is evolving in the next years. So when I interviewed the people that were working at the Teatro Nacional Maria II in Lisbon, one of them, which is actually now also the CEO, the director, he told me that for them, the European Theatre Convention acts as an accelerator for change. And I think that this is a very important element in the work of European cultural networks, and that needs to be further enhanced. For those of you that are not so familiar with European cultural networks, although I imagine that being here and attending an ECBN conference, you are exposed to their work. There has been a lot of discussion during the last years about the value of the European cultural networks. How can this be further underlined, promoted, and explained? But in reality, like the cultural networks themselves have produced this manifesto back in 2016, where they actually underline the role that they have in nurturing relationships across national borders, supporting people to overcome local as well as global difficulties, and exchanging ideas, knowledge, and expertise. Their raison d'être is to help the cultural sector take risks and meet new challenges. Now, cultural networks in the EU agenda at the very beginning, let's say, of the European integration projects were not so much considered, let's say. It was after the 90s that they have acquired a more important role, and they have been recognized as vehicles, let's say, of European values, as a way to reach out to the critical mass, let's say, of cultural organization and of cultural actors on the ground across nations. I mean, of course, this has been, there has been also a specific strand within the culture program that addresses networks. Based on that, either on project-based funding or on operational funding, this allowed the survival and the growth of different cultural networks across Europe, but also the creation of new ones. One criticism that there is there about, okay, so how do those cultural networks operate within all these architecture of EU cultural policies is this competition, let's say, to fit into the agendas, to have access to funding for their work. And sometimes, like you see this report that was published by the Culture Action Europe in 2016 as well, that sometimes, like they're trying to represent themselves to fit a tight European agenda. And does this represent exactly the needs and the values of their members? So some of you might know that the recent Creative Europe call for networks had explicitly outlined the need for the projects to be presented to have a very special relevance and reference to the European Green Deal, particularly encouraging the cultural and creative sectors to adopt more environmentally sustainable practices. So the question is, okay, so if the sector is doing that, is it because they need it, or is it because it is imposed by funding mechanisms or policy priorities? Michal, that was here from the ENCACT, gave you an example of how one intercultural network adopts and puts in place this policy, let's say, direction, either by organizing different kind of activities, but also in the same time practicing what they preach, when it comes to green and to sustainable practices in their work. So you see here 3 examples of, like up there you see the ENCACT network that have really tried to identify, okay, so how are we contributing with our choices into reducing our footprint, let's say. or the European Network of Cultural Centers that has also published some guidelines on how they are greening their own organization, plus the SHIFT guidelines for networks right now that also Michal made the reference to, which actually tries to give guidelines, suggestions, and input to different cultural networks on how they can be more sustainable and environmental friendly. So for those of you that have worked in theater, you know that this is perhaps one of the most polluting as well areas within the sectors within the cultural and creative industries. Just imagine a theater production, what it means to create a set, what it means to create a set and not need it after a couple of weeks, costumes, rehearsals, lights, everything, and especially touring, which is a very big challenge when it comes to cultural cooperation and international work, which is very important for this field. So I think the European Theatre Convention is a good example to discuss about those things, especially because they are a network that is has a long history, but not too many years. But in the same time, they are already incorporating the green transformation into their work, and it's especially recognizing the 3 dimensions that this has for theater, which is both for productions, both for the building itself, so the theater, and in the operations. As I said before, think about touring or mobility. The European Theatre Convention, I forgot to say, that represents theaters that are national theaters, so publicly funded theaters in their own country, and they are mainly they're in 25 European countries. So they have also established a Green Committee and an action code that I will show to you in a while, and they're connecting with other networks, for example, for translating all these Greek, I am Greek, but I'm not, the green guidelines, let's say, for theater. Here you see in 8 points, like what are the action code that was adopted in June 2021 and on which this network is really working. So they have published an action guidelines for the theaters with specific suggestions to reduce the sector's ecological footprint, underlining that one size does not fit all. Like what a theater in Lisbon that has experience in dealing with these things, or the National Theatre of London can do, is not the same that with a theater in Cyprus that is just entering this process, and that they should be aware that, you know, like there are small steps that need to be taken in order to achieve this. Then knowledge transferring activities through a lot of trainings that they organized recently, specifically for technical directors that are working in the theaters, and for artistic managers as well, on how artistic directors, on how they can introduce the sustainability and the green element in all the phases of the production, from the conception of a project until its implementation, or until upcycling theater sets or other elements, let's say, of the production. And training, exactly, so training for the professionals while changing behavioral, artistic and organizational practices, artistic visions for greener and more just future, so producing narratives on stage that have to do with this, revisiting the touring models, organizing public debates with artists, scientists and stakeholders, and of course promoting a bit the work and influencing policy regulations at the European and the international level when it comes to sustainability. And they have already put a name in 2030 to be carbon-free, let's say, footprint among those theaters. In the same time, they're also mobilizing other resources. For example, here you see one of the projects that one of their members have organized, bringing together other members of the network and working specifically on this Sustainable Theatre Alliance for a Green Environmental Shift, which is very interesting to see how the network gives the opportunity to their members to take the conversations even further. So now I'm going to share with you just 2 quotes, let's say, like from the 2 stories that I think they were quite interesting, from the ones that that I explored. For example, talking with the president of the National Theatre in Lisbon, we heard that, you know, like from all those trainings that they have received, we got both the info in a structured way a context to bring to our colleagues, and we also have this peer pressure. Like if the theater of Liège can work this way, then we can do it as well. Not that the sense of urgency was not there, but this makes this context a lot more easier to navigate and put the pieces of the puzzle together. So I think that this is interesting to see exactly this peer pressure element, so learning from each other and trying to be inspirational, let's say, that works a lot inside the network. Then talking with the technical director from the theater organization of Cyprus, he was also saying that he was very privileged when he started working for this organization, that they obliged him to follow the courses that were offered by the network. And he said that if you get passionate about it, you try to go beyond the nuts and bolts, and then you can also become more creative. We all need the scientific knowledge and the experiences of other theaters, as well as to know that you can always get in touch with a colleague somewhere and ask how they applied something in their own work. Then they also very much underline that for them sustainability is a 360 work. Like, of course, we're talking about the ecological and the green transition, but here the theaters are also serving as an example, no? Like as an institution setting the example in a symbolic level. So for them, sustainability has to do with social, political, and environmental challenges and the responsibility of such institutions towards them. And then coming back to the question whether it's the policies that influence the practices or are the practices and the needs that influence the policies, like talking with the Secretary General of the organization, like two main elements I think are relevant to underline. That, I mean, she recognized that as a network we had activities and initiatives there, but of course the guidelines, the framework that is provided by the funding that we receive helps us to structure this work and to give more emphasis and do more strategic, adopt a more strategic approach. But in the same time, what she underlined is that the members right now are willing to share. Everybody needs the information and having suggestions and ideas on how they can improve these practices. And then in this way you create a critical mass because we don't have time to lose. So I also believe that we still need to gather more narratives of change. I was very lucky, like today, this morning, Misha was here, and she's the recently appointed advisor to this network that is going to support, let's say, the whole network in developing more sustainable practices in the near future. And then this is perhaps summarizing this interconnection, let's say, when it comes to policy priorities, members' priorities, and where the European cultural networks stand a bit, and how this peer pressure that comes from being inspired or sharing practices within the network among the members can influence policy, but in the same time, this pressure of fitting into the policies that exist, to the funding schemes that are available, also brings this pressure, let's say, to European cultural networks to develop more work in this direction. So I think I'm done. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to your question. This is ongoing work.
Thank you so much, Martina, for bringing this broad picture at European level. Please don't forget to send your questions, if you have any, to the code, or later on you can raise your hand and we can pass the microphone or make any comment. Our last presentation deals with practical approaches to territorial conservation of historical cultural landscapes. And the title of the project is Interactive Maps of the Cultural Values of the Landscape. And it will be presented by Marketa Santrukova, that is a postdoc research from the Silva Torouka Research Institute for Landscape and Horticulture at the Faculty of Architecture of Czech Technical University. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the introduction. Please for the presentation on the screen, if it's possible. Thank you. Welcome in Prague. I would like to present one of outputs of our projects which focus on historical cultural landscape. And at first, I would like to say that we deal with landscape like with a cultural heritage. And we try to identify heritage values of landscape, and my short speech will be about the methods and of identification, and short about the presentation. In the introduction, I have to apologize because I suppose that there will be a laptop, and then I could show you our interactive map on a screen, but there isn't, so only there will be links at the end. Okay, our first stage and what we used was typology of historical cultural landscape made by UNESCO in 1992. So it's 30 years old, but still useful. And this very rough typology we make more precise and more structuralized. It's mainly developed for Central European landscape, countryside, so we don't have there types that connected with marine landscapes, but of course it's open structure, and we will be pleased that if some other researchers use it and developed it for more European or worldwide. The first big category are designed landscapes. Some pictures, what we mean by designed landscapes, so landscapes of aristocratics, manor gardens and parks, spa landscapes, pilgrimage landscape. The second and the biggest group is organic evolved landscape. This landscape is results of social, economic, administrative, and religious interactive people and nature. So it's a very large group that get together many of human activities in landscape. Some pictures only from the Czech Republic, so you can see typical settlement structure, typical field structure, orchards, ponds, old mining areas, and other. The third big category group are associative landscapes, landscapes that are connected with mainly religion, thoughts, and with historical events. So also some examples. I think that for you the Battle of Austerlitz is the most common. Okay, and data sources. Because we try to find data sets that could illustrate and that could help us to find this historical cultural landscape in our model era. The first we use is Corinne land cover, which is European databases made by Copernicus. And it's so this databases is could be used in all Europe. I think that the similar data are in so other European countries is something like the fundamental base of geographic data. For us, data of the Czech Republic, but similar data sets are made for all European countries. And then we used many specialized databases for the Czech Republic, but also many of them have their partners in other states and were made other national levels. Specifically, I would like to mention Natura 2000, which is European project of the European Union about mapping nature biotopes in landscape in countryside. Other data. Okay, a few words about our model area, which is in the central Bohemia, eastern from Prague, near the UNESCO town Kutná Hora, Kuttenberg, and we found one administrative unit, one of the administrative units, and we try to implement this data, this European or national data on this model area. We set up criteria, how many share of this different land cover types should be filled on the network that we lay over our area. So it is for the shape polygon data. For point data sets, we created a buffer. We tried 1 kilometer, 3 kilometers, and we studied the neighborhood of these point features of the historical cultural landscape. Okay, so the final, we made two maps that map historical cultural landscape in our model area, our model region, and the second map was more detailed, that mapped the specific values of the landscape. First, we found that we can say that the historical cultural landscape covers about half of the model area, and there is the map of the whole area. You can see some concentrations of historical cultural landscape and some white places, blind spots where the historical or cultural values of landscapes are damaged by the modern development. Here is the detailed map, and I'm sorry because we made it for big or big screen, big or in large scale, so it is not good to be presentable this PowerPoint presentation. And at the end, some words about our interactive maps. There are links. We used Argis servers made by Esri, and there are, of course, this map. You can zoom it. There are pop-ups that you can open more information and detailed information about the landscapes and the points and polygons of the landscape with historical cultural values. And these maps are used by the National Heritage Institute for setting up their strategies or landscape policies, how to deal with cultural values of the landscape and how to protect them. So, if there is someone from the staff who can open these links, it will be nice, but I'm not sure if it's possible. If not, it's all, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Marketa. We will make available all the presentations, so later on, I mean, I'm sure that they can enjoy.
I'm sorry, because I thought that there would be a laptop and I can manage it myself. So.
Yeah, well. Well, it is, we still have some minutes for some questions. If you have also any comments, we have seen during the day that as a society and also as an ecosystem, we are facing great challenges, and we have to provide the sector with common answers, co-created, co-designed from an holistic point of view. So these spaces for debate are critical, are key for future developments. So the floor is open.
So I would like to know the first presentation. Thank you. All presentations were really interesting, and I think it's
Space better, yes, for the online participants.
Yeah, we always forget there are some people outside and all looking at us. Thank you for the presentation. It was really, really inspiring. So for the first presentation, I think my first question popped out in mind. Can you explain also, I mean, you studied very deeply the fashion industry, or in very special the denim industry, but could you elaborate a little bit on how would you see it in similar creative industry sectors to apply your approach? Or you say, no, it's not possible, I don't know. Maybe you can elaborate.
So we already mentioned at the end of our presentation the Van Gogh Museum. And they did a similar thing with impact measurement. And it's really also about speaking with the people that you want to get the information from. So what they did, they actually researched how they include minorities in Amsterdam, young people between 17 and 25. So, for example, in a museum sector, you can really well apply it and then also see what can be changed. I believe also in a lot of other sectors it could be applicable. Let's say maybe less for visual art, but for also theaters or dance companies or associations that are trying to push forward a vision and a mission. Then, yeah, I think in basically a lot of situations it could be applicable. Maybe you want to add something?
No, I think I agree on the most, but like, yeah, taking away the sustainability factor, but more really looking at different kind of impacts that companies make. So in that sense, it is the research approach that is applicable to other companies in the CCIs.
Yeah, it was my feeling too that you can use it in other sectors too. So more questions. Everybody seems to be happy.
Maybe a bit tired.
Tired, yeah.
Well,
Can I ask a question to the audience?
of course, sure.
Did anyone hear of the TOC before, the theory of change, of this framework? Because you said you did, but I'm quite curious if we're, presenting on something very new, or maybe you can raise hands if you know it. Only a few. Okay.
It was totally new to me also, so thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, I might make a question as well. Martina, what do you think, what are the main policy and funding triggers for fostering the transition to a greener cultural and creative sector?
Okay, maybe I'm not the one to solve this wide theme, let's say, but I think that, you know, like the cultural sector cannot do without policies, and the cultural policies cannot do without the cultural sector. So there needs to be a conversation, a dialogue, an exchange on what exactly are the frameworks that would enable the cultural and creative industries to actually enhance the things that they want to do already. So like to have the regulatory frameworks, the legal frameworks that would allow them and that would facilitate the work for them. That's one thing. Second thing has to do with education and training, like in developing the skills that are needed to actually being able to implement not the small changes in regards to green transition, but the more sophisticated ones that might have to do with bringing together scientists and practitioners to see how a theater building can be more sustainable. So I think that one is the regulatory framework, the other one has to do with training and education, and the other one has to do with the constant dialogue that needs to be established between the policy level and the cultural sector in terms of what is needed. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Lisa, how do you think the cultural and creative sector and industry in general can apply the learnings from the Mad Jeans project?
I think the learnings are, yes, we said not only applicable to the fashion industry, but other sustainable brands. It was, the research was obviously about consumption behavior. So I think it's the different like insights or recommendations that we've put forward. I think other brands or organizations could implement it in their communication or marketing strategies to reach. It's really more about like how to reach a bigger audience, to adapt to sustainable choices, and how to target them. So those are the main things, I guess, from the recommendations that came out of it. But also the collaborations it is something that's actually applicable to a lot of different brands or companies, or the museums also the other way around can benefit from working together. So I think that's it.
Great. Yeah.
Marketa, how do you think these interactive maps could help the creative and the cultural sector and industry to go through and to go towards this greener transition?
Okay, thank you for your question. I think that the first is to make knowledge about this heritage among the wider audience, and it's this concept of historical cultural landscape is quite new. So we have 24 in the Czech Republic, so-called cultural heritage protected landscapes. It's only a small amount of entire area of the Czech Republic, and this concept is not common in Europe, and it is not common among practitioners and people who decided about development strategies, about landscape policy. So our main aim is to develop or to propose a method how to identify cultural values of the landscape easier, and make or try to make wider knowledge of cultural values of the landscape among landscape architects, stakeholders, politicians.
Thank you.
Any other question, comment? Yes, Gary, well, I will give.
Thank you. I would like to ask our lovely Dutch team. You spoke a lot about the marketing in the way how to raise the awareness about the sustainability choices and so, but isn't it now like very challenging for the actually sustainable brands in the terms like to tackle the greenwashing, which we can see in the marketing of the big brands who are like, you know, using this like sustainability language for products which are not really sustainable, so the customer starts to be, you know, confused and don't know what to trust and so like, yeah, isn't it like another like challenge for them how to tackle this, or did you talk to Matt how they are actually dealing with that?
Yeah, it's true. It's not only the brands, but also legislation there will be needed, and yes, steps taken which hopefully will support on that. And even then, it's going to be fights and challenges of in how far, if you're a sustainable company, can you make certain claims. So it's not all waterproof, and that just to say, okay, you just need to share more or work on your marketing, and then it's solved. I think we had some learnings from interviews with experts who are also talking about this, and they were giving some recommendations there as well that we put forward. One of them could really be working together with other companies that are, you know, certified or have a standard, are you know, proving or using data and to track really how companies are producing, and to really put it forward with facts. So the more facts you can have or work together with companies that are providing this or reports, the stronger you can be in the claim. So it's still challenging. There's like minor things that can be done already, and then there's this legislation part which hopefully will support on that as well.
And is there a legislation part already in some like progress? Are you aware of that?
Well, something I wanted to add is relating to the B Corp quality mark. So you're also kind of talking about marking the quality of a brand. And I think that the expansion of this mark is really significant if we want to make a clearer distinction between brands that are being sustainable or greenwashing. And so what we see in certain brands is that you walk in the store and like right on the window there's huge printed sign of this is a B Corp, so you're really aware. And Mud can also push that more forward maybe. But at the same time, we also realize it's really difficult what we're doing, because we're trying to figure out what is consumption behavior, but at the same time you go to social media and you get like a ton of influencers that are like, oh, buy this, buy that, and you get the feeling that it's sustainable, but it's not. So it's really important also, I think that something that also a lot of respondents answered in the open questions, that there is a kind of change in value and kind of, yeah, that we change the whole stigma around this, and that it also will become more important to talk about this and to do more of these kind of surveys, because I think that the participation of the respondents also, you know, they gained a bit more knowledge in this, and so now they will also maybe search for better information, more transparency, prior to making a purchase. So yeah, just continuing to do this research also will probably help to change that kind of things.
And I have one more question for you, and it's related to the renting of the clothes, because on one side it looks like an interesting idea, on the other side I'm not sure how much it can be really perceived as sustainable, considering the shipping, cleaning, packaging, which is like for one pair you would do this like multiple times.
Yeah, good question. Something we didn't mention is that there are a lot of, how do you call it, like retail points that are not specifically from mud, but from other like supermarkets and stuff, where you can just go and bring your clothes, and then the jeans are actually transported alongside with other packages. So they won't let jeans be shipped from Spain to Netherlands if there's no other shipment going on. So as a client of mud, you're also aware that certain points it can take longer for the shipment, or that you need to go to that retail point yourself and drop off your package there because they won't come to pick it up. So there are kind of things that you have to agree upon as well when you want to participate in this system, that also enable the sustainability behind it, because otherwise indeed it wouldn't be sustainable at all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we come to the end. There is still not much research about this topic, the green transition in the CCCI sector. So I would like to congratulate Martina, Lisa, Fi, and Marketa. Congratulations for having chosen this topic in your research specialization areas. And big thanks for joining us today and sharing your research projects. Thank you so much. I would also like to thank you for your contribution. We really think that there is still a gap, to connect researchers that they quickly leave, practitioners and policymakers. So thank you for contributing to this dialogue. Still, I think that we need to build more spaces where researchers, scholars will listen to the practitioners. Practitioners will have the chance to explain their challenges, and policymakers and decision makers will also listen, in order to develop better informed policies. So thank you so much. And now we can go and enjoy